2015, PADI started the first International Women's Day of Diving. On this day, women all over the world came together to celebrate their passion for diving and the underwater world. The event was a huge success, with over 6,000 divers in 65 countries participating. Half the world's population are women, but only 35% of divers are female, which is why PADI started this annual event to support equality in diving and to encourage more women to enter this traditionally male-dominated sport. So before I tell you about my event, let me take you back in time and share my story of how I got here. Having grown up in a diving family, I started traveling around the world at just 6 weeks old with my parents on their dive adventures. Back home in Canada, when they were not diving, we attended many dive shows across the country, where I would sit spellbound for hours, watching the incredible underwater images. It was at one of these events in 2008 where I met Jill Heinrich for the first time. She immediately became a role model for me as I dreamed about becoming a diver. Little did I know then that our paths would cross many times in the future. In 2013, I got certified in a very supportive environment. Paula Brooker, the owner of the Dive Academy in Canada, specializes in teaching children to dive. Later that year, I dove my first shipwreck in the St. Lawrence River. The experience was so exhilarating that I was determined to share it with others, so I created a video which I presented at the Niagara Divers Shipwreck Symposium in Welland, Ontario that following spring. Having walked off stage, having survived the experience of presenting to 500 divers at just 14 years old, I was not sure if I wanted to continue speaking publicly ever again. However, the support I received afterwards was overwhelming. The most inspiring encouragement came from Joan Forsberg and Georgianne Watcher, both of which are members of the Women's Diving Hall of Fame. These two wonderful ladies took me under their wings and over time have become my mentors. Later, at the after party, which I have to tell you was well past my bedtime at that age, Georgianne introduced me to her husband Mike, who also loved my story and, as I would find out later, had a personal goal to nurture the next generation of divers. So they invited me to present in the fall of 2014 at the renowned Shipwrecks and Scuba Dinner Show, which is put on annually by the Bay Area divers. Their plans worked, and after opening for Ralph Wilbanks, I was hooked on public speaking, and I quickly started creating more presentations to share my love of diving with the bubble watchers of the world. In 2015, I made many dives and presented at several shows, but was not aware of PADI's inaugural Women's Day of Diving, as no events were advertised in Ontario. Up to this point, as a junior scuba diver, I was always diving with my parents, so I was sheltered from exposure to issues of sexism in diving. Later in the year, I became aware of these issues from reading the eye-opening article by Jill Heinrich, titled Sexism, Alive and Well in Scuba Diving. For those of you who have not read this article, it is available online at Diver Magazine, and I encourage you to read it. The following year, Jill set up the first Women's Day of Diving event in Ontario, with a charter in Tobermory's Bantam 5 Marine Park. At just 16 years old, I was surprised when I received an invitation from Jill to join her on her charter. You can just imagine my excitement, since she had been my role model for years. For weeks afterwards, I worked on editing a custom mask strap for her, based on one of her books, Chester the Manatee. The day was great. It was very empowering to be surrounded by female divers and to listen to their stories. Spending the day with Jill and having recently read her article, I found myself compelled to get involved with promoting women in diving. This past spring, I was invited to speak at the prestigious Our World Underwater Film Festival in Chicago. When it was my turn to speak and I started up the stairs, I was terrified since I was not only the youngest and least experienced speaker ever at their event, but I was wearing high heels for the first time and had visions of falling flat on my face as I crossed the stage. Well, I didn't fall, and after the show, the speakers gathered for group pictures commented on how calm I looked. To this day, I am still not sure how I pulled it off. As everyone started to leave, a group of 7 members from the Women's Diving Hall of Fame broke off for pictures. In chatting with them, they invited me to their Women's Day of Diving event, which is to be held in Ohio at the White Star Quarry that summer. But before I could agree to attend, the famous underwater explorer and photographer Nancy McGee spoke up and challenged me to plan my own event in Ontario for the Women's Day of Diving. For those of you who have not met Nancy, she has a very commanding presence, and when she tells you to do something, you just find yourself doing it. That evening, as the event came to a close, I found myself thinking about the dive I needed to plan. I had no idea of what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, but I was hooked on the idea since the spark of promoting women in diving had been planted by Jill the year before, and I was determined to step up and get involved. On the drive home from Chicago to Toronto, I used the time to start planning the event since it was just 5 short months away. My first step was deciding a location, and since I wanted it to be a women's-only event, I decided to find a female boat captain. One of the most recognized women in the Canadian dive industry is Helen Cooper, the owner of Dive Brockville. She runs a fleet of boats in Brockville, Kingston, and now Picton. When I contacted her, she was very excited since she had also wanted to do an event like this for years. Together, we planned that she would captain a morning charter and I would be the first mate. That way, it would be an all-female event. In order to appeal to a wide range of divers, I decided to run the charter in the morning, followed by a lunch and shore dive in the afternoon at the Brockville Sculpture Park. With the what, when, and where planned, the next step was to get the word out. In Ontario, the largest dive show is the Niagara Divers Shipwreck Symposium in April, so I created a poster and promotional video to present at the show. For the next several months, I worked social media and posted updates to my Facebook and website. While my primary goal was to celebrate women in diving, I immediately thought that we should also give back to the community at the same time. Looking around Brockville, I chose to support Leeds and Grenville in Women's Interval House, which provides shelter, counseling, and support for abused women and their children. To raise money, I decided to sponsor the cost of the lunch myself and then charge $10 for the shore event, with all the money going to the shelter. Over the next couple of months, I also collected several prizes so that we could sell raffle tickets to raise additional funds. As the sun came up on the morning of July 21st, it was a picture-perfect day with beautiful blue skies and calm waters. It was going to be an amazing day to be out on the boat. For my first event, I had 10 lady divers of various backgrounds and skill levels come out to celebrate women in diving. Once everyone was on board, we motored over to the Robert Gaskin, which is a wooden bark that sits in 60 feet of water. There is a slight current on the wreck. There is a lot to explore, from the intact rails and cargo holds to the huge anchor near the bow, along with many dishes and bottles. Diving with a group composed entirely of women was very different than a mixed charter. The conversations on board were not centered around the size of your tanks or how deep you have gone. Instead, we spent the time getting to know each other and sharing lots of silly stories. The biggest concern on the boat was there going to be enough dive cookies to go around. The group was very supportive of each other, and since there was a wide range of skill levels. For one of the women, it was her first time diving in cold water and current. With the encouragement from the other woman, she had an amazing experience. It was so cool to see her excitement after the dive. This led us to sharing many more stories about other places to dive in Canada. The second wreck was the Lily Parsons, a 2-masted schooner which lays upside down in 20 to 70 feet of water. Even though there is a strong current at the site, this is an easy dive to do. Helen dropped us off next to Sparrow Island, where we followed the old anchor chain directly to the wreck. After exploring the impressive rudder, we worked our way down the wreck exploring the artifacts. To finish the dive, we just let go of the wreck and drifted down the side of the island to the calm sheltered bay, where Helen was waiting for us. While the vast majority of scuba gear is black, most of us had a colorful array of dive gear. As you can see, with my bright pink side mount tanks, everyone knows who I am underwater. Following the morning charter, the second event was an afternoon lunch and shore dive at the Underwater Sculpture Park in downtown Brockville. The sculpture park is a fun and easy shore dive with lots of opportunity for great photography. The numerous sculptures were created by students at local schools and have been placed underwater for divers to enjoy. The park has excellent steps built for divers to enter and exit the water, and there is lots of parking along with washrooms and benches for divers to gear up on. Helen's Dive Shop is located just a few blocks away for air fills. At the park, we had set up tents and chairs to serve a hot lunch of chili cheese dogs and salads. Sitting around on the blankets after the dive, we had an amazing time talking about our experiences from the morning as we enjoyed the warm sun and each other's company. After our lunch, we drew the names of the prize winners, and then after many hugs, we headed off with the memories of a great day and the new friendships that we had made. Later that afternoon, at Helen's shop, we had shot a short video for Helen to post to Facebook about the results of the day.
And here we are, back at the Brockville Adventure Centre. We have had a fabulous Women's Day, Girl Power. We had a great charter this morning and a wonderful barbecue at Centene Park. And now we're back at the shop, and now we can see how much money we have raised today. So how much money have we raised to give to the local women's shelter today, Kayla?
I've raised $215.
Wow, that is awesome. So I will be taking this to the Leeds and Grenville Interval House on Monday. $215 raised. Thank you to the sponsorship of Kayla and the Niagara Divers and the Brockville Adventure Centre. We had a great day, and everybody wants to do this again next year, so please join us next year for our Women's Day of Diving.
PADI's International Women's Day of Diving just keeps on growing. The numbers for this year have grown over to 1,000 events being held in 100 countries, celebrating women in diving. The date for 2019 is July 20th, and of course, I'm already starting to plan my event. As I wrap up tonight, I would like to close with 2 challenges. First, for the male divers in the audience. Please, treat all divers equally and not prejudge a diver based on their sex. On your next dive trip, look past their gender and focus on their ability in the water. In doing this, you will discover more about them and build more satisfying friendships. Second, for the women divers in the audience, I would like to take a quote from Jill's article. Feminism is not trying to rewrite history, but instead charting a course for a more equitable future. So my challenge to you is to act and get involved. Your action could take many forms, such as plan a women's only event, or take a leadership role in your dive club, or just change the conversation on your next dive trip. The past is the past. What are you going to do to make the future better for everyone?